If I'm not correct on that, I do apologize, but I believe it was 22 to 11. But the Jericho promo and the Undertaker promo really did have its similarities, and that's probably why I was thrown off a little bit with the momentum and everything. Because if you compare Jericho's return from 2007, at the end of 2007, to this one, you cannot say that there was more momentum placed on Jericho's return for the second day of 2012 than there was back in December of 2007 when they did the whole Save Us 222 thing. I think there was more of a religious type feel, a more anticipated feel for Jericho's initial return back in 2007 when he was in programs with people like JBL, who's a phenomenal worker to be booked against, people like John Cena and Randy Orton and Chris Jericho. Give him all the credit in the world for being a phenomenal guy to put somebody over and to pass the torch to somebody. But I think that Jericho just had more momentum coming in 2007. I think we hadn't seen Jericho since 2005. And he comes back for a number of years, and then he goes away, writes the sequel to A Lion's Tale, Undisputed. So he had a few things to deal with outside of the wrestling business. So that's why I say it seems like Jericho's always had this, on and off again relationship with the business, which is great for him too, because not only does he have stuff going on inside the wrestling business, but he has stuff going on outside of it as well. But I think that his return back in 2007 definitely had more momentum behind it than what we have seen now. I mean, the Control promo thing with the graphic shaking on the screen, like it was making it look like the arena was shaking, and then the lights go out and the explosion of the little bit of pyro they had there. There was way more pyro in comparison to the return he made in 2007. There was more of a hype for it because they had the torch carrier run to the arena throughout the course of that Raw. They had, the lights go out and even more pyro. Randy Orton did this phenomenal promo prior to Chris Jericho. They had the countdown clock. Everything, added up, making Chris Jericho's initial return ultimately better than this one. And just with the few things I named off there, I think that Jericho's return this time round was absolutely pathetic. And I'm not criticizing WWE Creative in any means, but the majority of the stuff they're doing here as of late, with the exception of a few things like the resurrection of Kane, have been absolutely pathetic. I mean, I think that this direction the Masked Kane is taking now is what he needs for his career. Glenn Jacobs is nearing the end of his wrestling career. He needs something to send him out with a bang, and hopefully this will open up the door for the final WrestleMania encounter between The Undertaker and Kane, which hopefully will come at WrestleMania 28 in 2012 if we don't get the sequel to Undertaker vs. Triple H from last year's WrestleMania. I like the direction that Kane's character is going in, but I really think that the majority of the stuff that WWE Creative are doing now, especially with this latest thing with Chris Jericho, is absolutely pathetic. I mean, Chris Jericho's going to be a while before he's considered a top contender for the WWE or World Heavyweight Championship on either brand. Following WrestleMania 28, if they don't have something substantial going for Chris Jericho, this is what I see forecasted for Chris Jericho. And you can tell me what your opinion of it is by tweeting me at HEW Entertainment, Jonathan Clarke 1 on Twitter, or by joining the conversation on our Facebook page. This is what I see happening for Chris Jericho. I see after WrestleMania 28, when the draft lottery comes around in the second or third week of April, he's moved from Raw, where he is now, to SmackDown, and he appears on the Raw Super Shows occasionally, kind of like how the Big Show appears occasionally on the Raw Super Shows. He's one guy who remains exclusive to SmackDown. There are these wrestlers who still remain exclusive to one show. Jericho's going to be that guy who makes occasional appearances on the Raw Super Shows and probably ends up on SmackDown on a full-time basis, and there, after WrestleMania, is when he'll be considered a top contender for something like the World Championship. I don't see Jericho having a WWE Championship run right off the bat. He comes back after a 2.5-year hiatus, however long he was gone, and immediately becomes a top contender for the WWE Championship. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I really don't. I think Jericho's going to be in a program with somebody stupid, someone like Wade Barrett probably, to help get the Raw Super shows over and the tours leading into WrestleMania. And then after WrestleMania is all said and done, that's when we're going to see breakthrough superstars make a name for themselves by winning breakthrough battle royals and having opportunities they were never handed before prior to WrestleMania. I think that's when we're going to see people like Chris Jericho really push the new talent initiative, and that's what I think Jericho's initially back for. To help push, younger talents like Wade Barrett and Heath Slater, the people who need these pushes, like Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre, who's still hanging on there. I think that's who we need to see Jericho booked in programs with. We're not initially going to see Jericho feud for the WWE Championship right away like we saw in 2007. The reason Jericho was feuding for the WWE Championship right off the bat when he came out of the box after being gone for 2 years from '05 to 2007 is because he had so much hype upon his return. Prior to him coming back, he was talking about the Sailors 222 promos on the internet in a different form all the time, and there was so much hype behind it. I mean, every day I was reading a news article by Jericho commenting on these mysterious Sailors 222 promos. So I think, there was a lot of hype and a lot of promise behind Jericho's return in 2007, and that's why they, had him feud for the WWE Championship right out of the box. And not to mention the fact that they were at a lack of superstar power back in 2007 too. There weren't as many wrestlers in the WWE that were well known back in 2007 because everyone was jumping ship from WWE to TNA, back from TNA to WWE, and everybody was so confused as to what was going on. It was almost like a rebirth was happening between WWE and WCW, and they were back in the middle of that war. Only in the present time, it's WWE versus TNA. So I think that with a lack of star power, the fact that there weren't so many superstars in a position to compete for the title, and with how much hype and how much promise Jericho came back with after a number of years of absence, I think that's initially why we saw him immediately feud for the title. We're not going to see that a second time round because it would be almost too similar and too much alike from what we've already seen. History would definitely be repeating itself when it comes to Chris Jericho. But like I said, the biggest problem I have with Jericho's return is this is a guy who started competing in Japan as Hart de Leon. He's had 2 very successful autobiographies that have reached the top of the New York Times bestseller list, kind of like how Mick Foley and Dwayne Johnson have done so with their autobiographies. So I really think that, he's had a lot of success, and he doesn't need to be brought back in the form that he's being brought back in. I mean, he has the same look that he had back in 2007, right through to 2012. So I think that, nothing has really changed about Jericho, just his presentation is just all screwed up. I mean, Kane had a bigger return, and he was only gone for a number of months. So I think that, initially the guy that we need to be seeing being pushed now for a major title, be it that he's on the last few years of his career, is Glenn Jacobs. Both The Undertaker and Kane were promised world title reigns prior to their retirements, and we're still waiting on The Undertaker to have at least one more before his retirement, although it's believed that people like The Undertaker and Kane are going to continue wrestling until they're physically unable to do so. If you saw the documentary that WWE released, it was a 3-disc set. It was called Chris Jericho Breaking Down the Walls, and it was a retrospective look at Jericho's 20-year career with WWE and WCW. I think that, that DVD set really chronicalizes what Jericho has contributed to the wrestling business. In his singles and tag team career with a number of tag team partners he's had over 20 championships combined together. The Big Show and Chris Jericho, I believe, won 40 championships in their careers. That's 9 more championships than Edge has won in his career. I believe Edge has won 31 championships with his tag team career and his singles career combined. So Jericho and the Big Show as a tag team, when they were the Undisputed Tag Team Champions back several years ago, back in 2009, they had a fair amount of championships to their credit. Jericho has an impressive resume, so it's beyond me why he continues to do such pathetic things when it comes to the wrestling business. Maybe Fozzy isn't that well publicized nowadays. That's probably why he's back. And probably around WrestleMania time, if he's not doing anything crucial, like fighting for the championship or something, that's when we'll see Fozzy come back to promote a new single or a new album. That'll probably be released on iTunes. Jericho's also made a few appearances in TNA with Fozzy as well. Um, so there are probably a lot of kayfabe reasons as to why Jericho is back right now, but I know a lot of fans are really enjoying Jericho's return because it's been a while since Jericho's been back. In his words, yay. It was the dumbest promo I ever heard anybody cut. I don't even know if I should classify that as a promo. I mean, the promo that he cut making fun of Randy Orton back in 2007 was absolutely far more superior than what we heard from Jericho this past Monday on Raw. I mean, he didn't even say anything. Comes out, high-fives the fan, stands in the ring for about 5 minutes, taking up airtime. I mean, it was a waste of camera time for someone like Jericho, who has phenomenal promo skills. One of the greatest guys to ever pick up a microphone. He is one guy who isn't suffering from microphone phobia, which is the term I have labeled to wrestlers who are afraid of using the microphone and have an inability to cut a good promo. I think that promo skills is something that's very crucial in the wrestling business, and it's something I always emphasize on for my weekly column in this corner with Jonathan Clarke, that I'm always writing about. Jericho's return is probably something that I will talk about for in this corner with Jonathan Clarke in an up-and-coming column here on the website. I know a lot of columnists and radio show hosts are talking about and writing about Jericho's return, rightfully so, like they were talking about NXT's premiere back in 2010. So I think, Jericho's return is definitely, attracting a lot of attention, which is what WWE wants it to do. But I don't think it's attracting as much attention as it did back in 2007. I mean, everybody was talking about Chris Jericho, and WWE achieved what they wanted in Jericho's initial return back in 2007 because the internet was flooded with Jericho news. And, you can follow Jericho on Twitter for more additional Jericho information. They were promoting Jericho's Twitter account on Raw. I caught that, and Jericho was also trending on Twitter more than anybody this past Monday, so that accomplished a lot for WWE and Twitter. And you can also follow Jericho on Twitter. We have been following Jericho for a considerable amount of time, even prior to his return to WWE. I admire Jericho's credibility to kayfabe everything. He just doesn't initially come out and tell you what's going to happen like some wrestlers do. Jericho kayfabes everything. I like that. And apart from being a part of the wrestling business, he does a lot of charitable work. He does a lot of stuff outside of the wrestling business. He did an interview for an autistic child that I know. So I think, Jericho's done a considerable amount both inside and outside of the wrestling business, which makes him an incredible human being. And I think the better thing to do with Jericho, rather than being him this obnoxious heel on Raw or SmackDown as the world champion like we saw several years ago, with Shawn Michaels being the challenger for the title in an incredible feud in one of Shawn Michaels' final programs